Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Thank you, Chappie. My name is Tony Thompson. I am moderating this panel, The Future of Social Media in Professional Communication. One thing I do not like about these events is that they get a little bit stuffy. And I also know that my good friend Eric Johnson is presenting next door. And those of you who've had my class, how do I like to start off class? If you think this is above 2 claps and a Ric Flair, you're sadly mistaken. Can I get 2 claps and a Ric Flair? That's what I'm talking about. Okay, let's let our shoulders down a little bit. Let's have some fun. We have an excellent panel. Those of you who are here, you saw what they do, and I also told them, I said, okay, I want to do away with the typical introductions because also I feel those are a little bit stuffy. So I told them, give me 5 things that people may not know about you, so I'm about to introduce my panel. My first panelist is a social media influencer. She's got more followers than I can count. She drives a massive pickup, which is a Ford F-350, right? She claims 75% of her sales are made of street tacos and iced coffee, and will argue with anyone that baseball is not a boring sport, and has a bigger hat collection than most sports teams' fans. Let's give it up for Kate Thornton. My next panelist is the VSP Vision Marketing Supervisor. She speaks Spanish fluently. She has a long-haired, I'm gonna mess it up again, dachshund? Dachshund named Ollie. She teaches yoga on the weekends. She ran a half marathon in 2024 and recently took a trip to Thailand. Let's give it up for Kendall Hoy. My next panelist, and last but not least, is a photographer and digital marketer. He grew up in Wisconsin and Oregon. If his house was a pasta dish, it would be called testosterone because he had 6 younger brothers. His family owns a great restaurant in Vancouver, Washington. What's the restaurant called?
Victoria's Cafe.
Shameless plug. Let's do this.
Yep, there we go.
He goes out to movies 3 times a week and moonlights as a frat dad. Everybody give it up for Lance Lee. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this, I'll ask them some questions. A lot of them are going to answer them, and then I'll open it up for the group toward the end. But also, if you have just the seething desire to ask a question, feel free, raise your hand, we could stop, okay? So, my first question for the group, Kate, we can start with you, Kendall, then Lance. How did you find your way into social media and content creation on an official capacity?
Okay, so I'm pretty much the same age as all of you guys, right? So we grew up with social media, so I got to see like Instagram and other social media kind of evolve. But I really got started with TikTok when it first came out because I don't know if you guys remember, but it was like pretty much just a dancing app. And it was kind of like at this point where you could post videos and it's like no one from your hometown would see it. It would just go out to a bunch of strangers. And I live in a super small town, so I didn't want anyone to know that I was posting on social media. And so I just started posting videos on there. And then I had one video get like 200,000 views. And I was like, this is not a real app. Like, this is not like real views. But I kept posting videos and people started following me, and I got to like 30,000 followers on there, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty fun. And then I took it in the direction of like talking about what my family does, which is orcharding, growing apples and pears, and what equipment we're using, and educating people. And then I had more engagement that way. People were asking me questions, and it helped kind of steer my content, and then the rest is history.
Nice. Kendall?
Yeah, so I actually started interning on the WSU social media team, so I'm sure there are a couple of you there, and that's kind of where I first started doing a lot of the content creation. It was very hands-on, and then I actually graduated in 2020, like the peak of the pandemic, so that was super fun, and I had to get a little creative with how I was going to use, right, all these awesome skills that I've learned from Murrow, and I ended up freelancing for about 1.5 years for local small businesses in Sacramento, California. I did things from retail to wineries. I helped open up a couple of different like hair salons and ran kind of all of their grand opening campaigns. And if you've done freelance, you know that it's not just social media that you do a little bit of everything, especially when you're young and hungry. And so it's kind of where I started, and then I landed in corporate America shortly after that.
Nice. Lance.
Awesome. Yeah, I got into social media when I was in college. I was a Murrow student as well, about halfway through college. I was a first-gen student and kind of like paying my way through a lot of stuff and just trying to exist. And I was in the service industry to get through that. And part of being in the service industry, I was like, hey, I can tell stories, I can shoot photos. I like social media. I'm on it a lot. Could I start dabbling with your guys' accounts a little bit and see what I can do with that, if I can make that special for you? And sure enough, over time, and several clients and a lot of really cool experiences, I not only was able to do something special with that, but I got into roles where I was able to teach others how to do it well. And that's how I've landed in this space as a professional.
Nice. For all three of you, what trends do you see in social media marketing over the next few years and beyond? However you want to answer it. Kendall, let's start with you. Is that okay?
Okay, I think the future is human. I will say it. I know that there's a lot about AI and how that can help us create really cool content, but there also is, especially in the B2B space where I am, you gotta show your team, you gotta show your people, because that's what really makes your company and your brand stand out. You'll see in the metrics, right, when you post a standalone graphic or an AI image, it does not even compare to when you have an actual sales manager up there. And I think that technology is fantastic and we should embrace it, but don't forget, right, to show the humans behind your brand, because that's what's gonna set your company apart when everyone else is using AI.
Cool. Lance, what about you?
Yeah, I work in a little bit of a different world, so I see both human and AI working really well together. For some context, I work with a lot of restaurants and bars and cafes and nightclubs and spaces that are small to medium sized, but also a lot of mom and pop shops. And they don't have the biggest budgets, and they don't have a ton of manpower outside of their space where they have their servers and their hosts in the kitchen and things like that. So there's a lot of things that need to get done to be able to connect with people well online, whether it's through Facebook, Instagram, or whether it's through search engines or map apps, so you can find the establishment and get there, so someone can actually walk in and be sold on buying a product or being a part of the culture and community. So I see in the next few years, it's something I'm working on, but getting more automated like DMs and messages to at least initiate conversations and answer basic questions that then get you to a point where you can talk to someone on a more intimate level on things that are important or relevant that AI can't answer as well. And then also get you into the space and engaging with the space and sharing your own experiences that can then be built in a more social element, social environment in the ways that users are most comfortable, because these small businesses too have a very large demographic of people from the age of 2 to 100 visiting this space, and everybody uses social very differently or uses technology very differently. So being able to use those tools and then humanize them in the next steps after that is huge for these spaces that really need them to do well with their business, to really have a livelihood for themselves and for their kids and whatnot. So I see that as at least trends in that very niche space of the social media industry.
Okay. Kate, what about you?
Y'all had some really good answers. So love what you said about like bringing the human side of things. I'm a big believer in storytelling. So I always go back to what I know, which is the Apple industry, right? We're growing a product and it's going straight to people's hands. And so, how do you get people interested in that? And in years past, we'd have like cooperative initiatives where it's like you put $1 million into a print ad or in a magazine somewhere, and you've got this gorgeous, sexy shot of an apple, right? And it looks great, but is it moving the needle? Are people going into grocery stores and saying, hey, I want to buy an apple because I saw a really pretty picture of an apple? No, not really. And especially like our generation, I don't know about y'all, do you guys like to be told what to buy? No. So it's like showing the story around a product or a service, telling all of the details around it. So what I focus on is like showing what growers do, showing what farmers do on a day-to-day basis, the less glamorous parts of it, how we're problem solving. This story around a product that is very real and worth buying because we know it's good, but why should people be spending their dollar on it? And so it's telling that story, bringing that human side into things. And I think also another point is like, whether it's any industry, all of us, we do internships, right? But you can only do so many internships. And I think we're in this world where it's like, you have so many opportunities. I don't know about y'all, but I get like opportunity paralysis because it's like, I want to do all these different things. It's like the Barbie conundrum. It's like, I want to be an astronaut one day, I want to be a farmer the next day type of thing. So you want to see the different sides of industries. You want to see what the day-to-day is. And so if businesses can really show like, what is their day-to-day? You know, is there a work-life balance? I think that's a really big focus. What is that compensation? What are your deliverables? What are some problems that you face? So showing like the internal mechanisms of a business and showing that culture, but also telling the story around a product or a service.
Sweet. Lance, I'm coming back to you. Question regarding restaurant stuff. How many of you, if I get a restaurant recommendation, the first thing I do is I'm going and I'm looking at web content. I'm looking at the pictures that they may have of their food. Is anybody guilty of that? Yeah. Okay. Knowing that, does that put a little bit more pressure on what you do for your small businesses, or do you actually like that, especially coming from a restaurant background?
Yes and no. I mean, it really depends on the client and their needs and what they're capable of. I mean, there are some restaurants and bars I've worked with that just suck, and it's really hard to advertise that or market it. You really need to, the business itself needs to be dialed in. Like, they need to have a good product or a good experience that people want to share. You can advertise all you want. You can sell a burger, you can sell a pint, but at a certain point, you can get so many one-time customers, but you want them returning. I'm lucky enough to be able to work with enough clients where they either have a culture that works really well, or an example I'll use right now is my family's restaurant. I don't run their social media. They don't have social media. They didn't want it. They didn't really have a budget for it. But they got their product dialed in, their service dialed in, where people posting photos and people sharing their experiences has gone a really long way, and they've been able to tell their stories through that. They've, 3 of my brothers work there and help run the place. My mom and her husband own and operate it. And they've got their own stories, but they don't really like social. They don't really want to be online, but others get to tell it for them, and they don't mind it, and they're able to control it in that space because the people they're spending time with and the relationships they're building are doing that for them. And then I'm able to see it in places like Yelp or see it on, I helped them set up Google and search engines like Bing and stuff like that, and make sure they had really good basic information so people were able to find them and were able to, hey Siri, please take me to a breakfast restaurant near me. And it would pull them into that space and be able to, they could then scroll through other people's photos and other people's reviews. And even the bad ones, still, I don't mind the bad ones. I know bad reviews are really scary. But at the same time, bad reviews still show that someone's passionate enough to say something about the experience that they had. They were there, and then I've taught my family how to either respond to that through those platforms or to just respond to it in person and continue to improve the culture and the experience and the product so that others who want to use social in a specific way or these digital spaces in a certain way are still saying what you need them to say in order to benefit your business.
Such a good point. It's an opportunity. If you have a bad review or I get bad comments all the time. It's an opportunity to showcase what kind of company you are, how you handle conflict and stuff.
And there's so many things that you can't control, especially in the digital world. So the things that you can't control, work on those, and they'll end up speaking for themselves.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, I'm throwing. Yeah, Braden, go for it.
A little bit more for Kate. At what point did you know that you could do this full time? When did you guys take that leap?
Well, I graduated and I was like, well, this is what I'm doing now. No, I think it was when I was getting consistent enough, I checked my inbox and I was getting a new inquiry pretty much every week type of thing. And I was like, all right, I'm getting enough interest that I could but it's also, I went to WSU, right? It is a phenomenal business program, phenomenal communications program. And I know that if social media, everything shut down tomorrow, I could flip and find another job, right? So I was that confidence in I love what I do, I love the content I'm creating, and I love what I'm doing, and it's something different every day. It allows me to be on my farm full time, but also make some real money, because farmers don't really make real money. And then, but I always had the fallback of, I've got a degree I can throw down on the table and pick up a job. So just confidence in your skill set that you can work pretty much anywhere, right?
Kara, do I need to hand them a mic? Do I need to hand people?
Talk loud.
I do know
yeah,
that.
Yeah, you can.
So you talked a little bit about the future of social media and you're seeing it as human. I think the word authentic gets thrown around way too much these days, to the point where I think most of the students are starting to become genuine, which is kind of interesting in itself. What about how you see your industries in particular, or other industries in particular, with the way the channels or platforms are going. TikTok has maybe like 18 days left supposedly, and then we are also like Twitter's kind of scary, or X or whatever it's called, is kind of scary these days. Like how do you see maybe the platforms and like what does corporate look like compared to maybe restaurant compared to farmers?
Sure, I can go first. I think the big thing is you really got to know your audience, right? In the business-to-business, B2B space, also VSP Vision is like a eye care company. So, right, I'm talking a lot of times to doctors. And if any of you know a doctor, you know that they don't like the BS. Like, you got to tell it to them straight. They appreciate the story, but they want the facts. And so for them, we found success on like X before, or Twitter, you know, before it went through its thing. But I think right now we do a lot of content on LinkedIn. That's what we primarily use. And TikTok can be a tool, but you know, it doesn't make the most sense for our brand. And I think it's being really honest with your company and your teams about that, because you'll have VPs and CMOs that go, you got to be on TikTok. That's where everyone is. But if it doesn't make sense and it's not where your audience is, you kind of got to like fight for that, because our numbers on LinkedIn are significantly better than when we post on TikTok. And that's where I think we can have the most authentic conversations with our audience, because it's in a more professional space and because we are, in my corporate environment, speaking directly to doctors and health professionals.
Yeah, okay, I agree with a lot of that. My mind's going a bunch of different places because there is so much change, and that's what's exciting about the social media world is like it's always evolving. You always got to pivot and stuff. Now I'm taking something that has been done since pretty much the beginning of time, right? Agriculture, you know, and it's like how do you make that fresh? How do you make that interesting? And so I'm catering towards where the gaps are, and I'm trying to fill those gaps. The gaps in education, where I'm seeing people don't really understand certain concepts, and I'm pivoting towards that. Now, platform to platform, I just have fun on TikTok, right? That's where the majority of my followers are, but they're not it's not the majority of my engagement, right? So there's a difference between I could have a bunch of followers, but if I'm not getting a ton of engagement, is it really moving the needle? Back to that point, right? But if I post on Instagram, I don't have as many. I have like 195,000 on there, right? But I've got double.
Oh, okay.
Just a few.
All right. But like I go on TikTok and I have double that. But I have like 5 times the amount of engagement on Instagram. So I focus more on my content because that's really moving the needle. Versus you're a creator. If you're on social media, you gotta be on it because you love it and you love what you're talking about. I think that's my biggest advice. You can't go into social media with the mindset of, I'm going to become an influencer, I'm gonna do this full time, and this is gonna become a business for me. Now, whereas if it's a business and you're doing it for your business, that's a different story. But if you're an influencer or you wanna be a content creator full time, you've gotta enjoy it. And so I try to avoid that burnout of creativity by just posting whatever I want to on TikTok. It's like that fun, it's like my Snapchat story, but on like a bigger platform, right? Versus Instagram, it's a little more polished. I review a little bit more because I know more eyeballs are gonna see it. Whereas TikTok is kind of like rolling a dice versus, and this will be my last point, you go on LinkedIn, I know what I bring to the table is, I'm a young person, I'm 22 years old, I see the world differently than a lot of people that are in corporate, that are, you know, a couple generations older than me. So I'm sharing my content, but also like in the copy, like the captioning, I'm talking about it through the lens of a 22-year-old. And I'm like, this is why I put this content out, this is the results I saw. So that's kind of how I handle the different platforms.
No notes, that was awesome.
Kendall, I'm coming back to you. You talked about going from freelance, and I also noticed there was a little bit of a tone. This is nothing against your company, but you're like, and then I went to corporate America.
Yes.
I feel like there's also a level of excitement as far for your day-to-day where it's making something that, like you say, corporate America, but you make it into something engaging and exciting. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, B2B doesn't have to mean boring. Not all of us can be like the next Duolingo, and that is just a reality that we all have to accept, right? But I think that's like the fun challenge, is you're presented with kind of a brand that historically is probably super traditional, maybe it's a little bit more conservative, but you have to make it interesting. And to Kate's point, I think a lot of that comes from the stories that my team and I tell. And making it, I'm selling basically optometric software, which is when you go right into your optometrist, they get your lenses, your glasses, it's how they do the exam, you book an appointment. And so we're providing a tool for them to help all of us see clearly, and that is a really impactful story. Eye care is healthcare, and the people who use our products help their communities, and I think that that is what makes it interesting. And I think that sometimes you just have to have a little bit of fun and break the rules of B2B, and that's okay too. So we've seen a lot of success doing that as well.
Nice. Kate, how do you, when we're talking about brands that you maybe partner with, I know you were joking about the whole hats thing and ag companies giving you hats. How do you vet, like what's that vetting process look like when you're working with brands?
Don't go for a money grab, even though it's really tempting, because sometimes I'm offered, a fat check and I'm like, ooh, but can I really go back to authenticity and being genuine? Can I really promote that? Do I feel good about that? Or do I feel like I'm being a fraud to those people who choose to hit that follow button and follow me, and they're trusting me, right? Like I realize I'm a face for my industry. People are looking at me as they trust me. They're really taking the information I'm putting out there, and they're not fact checking me. They're taking what I'm saying verbatim. And so I don't want to put out stuff that's like not authentic and not true and I don't truly support. And you can tell, I'm like a terrible liar. Like you can tell if I'm not really into selling something. And so I really try to select, I have like I'll have like people, I'm going to gift you this, headphone set if you put out a piece of content. I'm like, that's not really worth my time and effort, and then my page just kind of becomes a running ad. I'm looking for long-term partnerships now. So I talk to brands and I'm like, okay, you don't want to be just like a flash in the pan. It's great. I make one video, it might have a bunch of engagement, but are people going to remember it? I think the statistic is someone has to see something like 7 times for it to stick, right? So if I'm talking to a brand, I'm like, I'll help you tell your story. I'm not going to bring necessarily sales to you unless it's like pieces of clothing, something that's an easy link. But what I'm going to bring is awareness, and people recognize that brand. And so I try to be very clear with brands and see if they want to work with me and do at least 3 different posts with me. That's kind of my minimum.
Any questions? I like to bring it up. Yeah, go for it.
So there's been like a lot of presentations about like telling stories and getting kind of engagement, talking about brand images and stuff like that. And I think it's pretty important, but you can always like see an ad and go, okay, and then swipe on to the next thing. Not to be crude, but like how many people would actually give a shit about what you're doing.
Yeah.
I like your style.
You're so right. It goes back to the point of our generation doesn't like to be sold to. We don't like the BS of, oh, hey, like you should, maybe like the Flex tape commercials or whatever. That's kind of what I'm thinking, right? Where it's like super glamorized, like this is how it works. It seems like just like BS, right? And so what I mean by telling a story is like, you're taking your voice and you're saying, I use this product or I use this service and this is how I incorporate it into my life. Not just pandering to an audience, but it's like you're just showing authentically like how this works. And a lot of my videos are me talking, right? Which is kind of a niche in itself. It's not as much of like the trending audios and me like putting text on the screen. It's a lot of me talking. So a lot of people follow me for my voice, and so I incorporate that into my branded videos of telling the story and talking about the brand in a way that actually translates to my audience instead of their just like overly like commercialized language. I'm just talking about it like I would be having a conversation with one of you guys. So that's kind of how I approach it, but it goes back to like knowing your audience, like who are your followers, and like how do they want to be talked to? That's kind of how I approach it.
Other questions? Yeah.
So this might be a little bit broad, but I'm getting involved in this nonprofit organization, and they really need to get on social media. All they have is like a really outdated Facebook page. And I'm trying to help them with that, but I'm still very new in communication, so I was wondering if you have any like quick advice for getting established on these platforms for like a nonprofit.
I think this entire panel can answer that question. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, for instance, I was in like your same position. So we were starting to grow this new apple. It's called Sugar Bee Apple. Phenomenal apple if you haven't tried it, right? And I was 17, 18 years old, and I was like, y'all need to get on TikTok. And these are a bunch of like 45-plus-year-old marketers, and they were like, absolutely not. It's like not safe. And this is before like brands started really hopping on TikTok and, you know, showing up in the comment sections. Like, I don't know, like some of the brands, like Wendy's does a great job, right? But I was like, you guys need to get on TikTok. And I assumed the role of, you might have to get comfortable at being the face for the brand, and you have to like perform out some of these TikTok trends or do some of that stuff. So, and you're gorgeous, so you can do it, right? But like, just be comfortable at being like in the videos talking and showing the authenticity, and like get comfortable in front of a camera, and then you can pivot from there. And then always a selling point. I'm talking to marketing teams. I'm like, you make content, you can always repurpose it, slice it up, and put it together a bunch of different ways if they decide to work with an influencer or put the time and investment into, you know, more of a scaled up video production. You know, you invest in a camera crew to come out. I'm like, this is great. We can take all the videos that they give me, and then we can slice them up and put them together a bunch of different ways. And that's how you can like really bring that monetary aspect to say, this is worth investing in. Digital content, you can repurpose a bunch of times.
And I would say too, like, it's okay to start small. You don't have to be on every single platform all the time. Again, yeah, going back to your audience, right? If we're thinking about nonprofit and those folks who have disposable income, they actually probably are on Facebook or Instagram. They might be on TikTok, but, you know, really honing in on like, who has that money? Who are you going after? And I totally agree. If you have a face to a nonprofit to answer questions, that can be super helpful. But a lot of times too, it's, you know, communicators and marketers, we are kind of like secret salespeople. And sometimes we just got to pitch. We got to pitch to stakeholders. We have to pitch to those owners of the nonprofits and different things and really sell them on our idea. And so I would come with like case studies or use cases and kind of have some goals that you're going to track to prove. Because I'm sure you're going to crush them, but just kind of make sure, right, like, owners and those kinds of people, they want tangible things of like, prove to me it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And so kind of coming with proposals and plans, and it can be like 3-slide pitch deck of what you think you're going to do. And I think the more buy-in that you can get early on in any project, the more successful that you're going to be, whether you're doing something for a super small company or a massive corporation.
I would add too, I don't know what level of freedom you have to like post and get information out there, but whatever level of freedom you have, just get stuff out there. Like, it's very terrifying to learn in public, for sure. But it's the best way to study what audience you do have, and to study the audience that you're getting, and to figure out what does and doesn't work. Like, don't be afraid to use your phone. Don't be afraid to, even if it's just a little bit of text, to get a message out that communicates the vision. Like, just get stuff out there so you can kind of just build that base and that confidence.
I don't know if this is one of the questions that I had on my list, so this might be a curveball. I hope you don't hate me for this. Where do you guys go for inspiration on content?
I read a lot. I love reading and watching movies and just like entertainment in general. I learn a lot from just existing and talking with people and seeing things. So I get a lot of inspiration just from the mundane stuff. So I don't like listening to like specific industry expert influencers, for example. Like, that's valuable. I pay attention to it. I'll read technical books and stuff like that, but I'm far more interested in the human experience and what other people are interested in, and different stories in different places, and how different people are telling them, and how they're telling them on TV versus how they're telling them on a social media platform, versus how someone's telling a story in a bar when they can't think straight, like that type of stuff. And I'm just constantly taking mental notes on those things.
Why can't they think straight in a bar?
Yes, really simple questions like that. But that's kind of how I get inspired, and that keeps the world exciting for me, for one, but also encourages me to do things differently too, whether it's me content creating myself, or creating a plan myself, or teaching others to create a plan. Textbook is great, but it's a great foundation. I don't like sticking just to it to a T, and leveraging things that are outside of the scope of that thing that we're working on, or that space that we're in.
Nice.
I couldn't agree more. I think the more people that you can talk to, right, like the whole theme of Symposium this year is curiosity. And if you can master that and really take that as kind of one of like your core principles into your career, you're gonna soar, because people don't really like to ask questions anymore. And that is like a super lost art. And so the more questions that you can ask, the more people that you can talk to, the better you're gonna know any subject that you have to write to, create content to. So I definitely go to people in my network, out of my network, even if it's a little uncomfy, right, to make those connections. I also I'll go on like walks. I'm in downtown Seattle, and I will look at all the billboards and the bus ads, and there are some fun things out there. And I will snap pictures and I will send them to my team, and I'll go, this is a really cool way to write a headline, you guys. We should think about this. And there's inspiration truly everywhere. Looking at like industry articles too, like picking out some buzzwords. Don't ever underestimate a thesaurus. If you need to wordsmith, you can always find different words and different ways to say things. But I think kind of turning anything and everything into an opportunity to find inspiration just kind of makes life a little bit more fun and keeps you on your toes.
Okay.
All right. I'm coming from the perspective where my brand is me. So I got to make sure that I'm dialed in and I feel good, right? So it comes down to routines, right? So start every morning off, spend time with the Lord. Then I go and I get my iced coffee. You know, it's a daily routine, right? And that gets me going for the day. Like I feel good, I'm energized and stuff. Make sure you get some good sleep. I know it's hard when you're in college, because I was getting this all going while I was in college, and I had to drive 4.5 hours home every single weekend one way to go get videos, because there's not orchards around here. If you didn't notice, there's a bunch of wheat fields, but that's not my content. And so it's like really you gotta avoid burnout, right? And so it's like make sure that I feel good, and then I surround myself with like my industry and stuff. So a lot of my videos are out in the orchard. So I hop on a 4-wheeler and I start driving around, and I'm like, all right, I'm thinking of this world through the lens of a 5-year-old. What would a 5-year-old be interested in? And that's how I build a lot of my content, because when you're in the minutia of it, you're like, okay, this is not that interesting because I live this every single day. So I had to learn how to romanticize it a little bit. And then, of course, it's just being a mindful consumer. So on my social media, I'm on my For You page, and I'm like, okay, so you start scrolling, but start thinking, why did that make me stop scrolling? What hooked me there? How did they word that text? And how can I implement that into my niche, into my content? What are some trending audios? How could I, feed into that different trends? Like this morning, the price tag trend, where it's like someone's, well, maybe not, okay. But but it's the song price tag, and I'm like, okay, I need to do that with my dad and make it more farming style, because I know I'm going to reach a certain audience with entering into that trend, versus if I want to speak to more farmers, I'll hit different trends. So I guess make sure you feel good, make sure I feel good, and then also surround myself with what I want to make content about and being a mindful consumer.
Okay, so whenever I have guest speakers in my classes, they can talk about certain topics, but 9 times out of 10 when people ask questions, it's usually based off of careers. So, having said that, how do you think students can utilize social media in an effective way when maybe seeking that job that they really like? This is for the group.
I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I know we've talked about it a couple of times already. It's a really boring platform, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's awesome that it kind of sucks, because it really forces you when you're on there to think differently if you want to be more creative on it, but also be a little more focused when building relationships with people, or at least using it to get your foot in the door and communicate with someone, to then get FaceTime with people. I connect with a lot of individuals that I'll later meet up at a coffee shop, or I'll grab lunch with, and really cool things come from that, really cool projects come from that. I don't like the cringy thought leader stuff on there, but outside of that, that's very useful for some people too. But for me, I much prefer just showing cool, there's a million things going on, and these are the 4 or 5 I'm really into, and these are the things that I'm learning with people and what they're learning alongside me. I think that's really cool, and I've seen a lot of benefit from that, so I've really been encouraging that to my peers as well as my staff and freelancers I work with. To really not necessarily go on there and brag, but go on there and initiate conversations and initiate relationships that can then become something more social, more personal, more intimate offline. I think LinkedIn is a great example of social media being used as a tool instead of it being all-consuming, and it's a great, at least for me, supplementary thing to being creative in other spaces. I'm more creative on Instagram. That's my jam. I like Instagram, but I'm a little less personal there than I am on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think at the end of the day, right, you're kind of your biggest cheerleader, and you got to fight for your brand and the opportunities that you want. And so I think LinkedIn is a super powerful tool. And it's a way for you to kind of define your personal brand. Maybe you're not like full thought leadership quite yet, but I think everyone has, right, a piece of advice to share, and LinkedIn's rolled out a lot of really cool tools and ways that you can kind of, not like fake thought leadership, but you can just kind of add in comments that make it a lot more natural and less scary, right, than like you're writing this massive essay about like how proposing to your wife, what it taught you about sales. Like, no one wants to be that person, right? So like, you know, there's ways to authentically show up there, and I think as we move into a more like digital world, that's where a lot of people are going for opportunities. A lot of the people I interview for roles on my team come straight from LinkedIn, whether it's from a referral or right like on the little LinkedIn job board. So it is a channel. You do need to have a presence, but again, right, like consistency is key. Consistency can be every day, it can be once a quarter, once a month. It's kind of just making a little goal for yourself and kind of try and stick to it so you have something out there.
Yeah. So I did a couple of internships and stuff, and I got to see the corporate side. So I did like a big corporate internship over in Philadelphia, and I got to wear my suits every day and go and hang out with all these like executives and stuff. And I felt very much like low man in the totem pole and stuff. But then I quickly realized they hired me for a reason. They hired me for my perspective. So I know you guys all feel like I'm 20, 21, 20, 22 years old, whatever. You're like, I'm coming to learn, which you absolutely are. You want to, you know, have the humility and absorb as much as possible. But a lot of these people want to hear your perspective. Your perspective has so much value because the world is moving so fast and things are evolving so quickly that you guys have a stronger handle on it than most of the older generations. So bring that thought to the table. You know, don't always just be the quiet person taking in everything. It's great to take in things, but share, right? And that's all what social media is about, is sharing your opinion, sharing your perspective. And I know there's this kind of like, you don't want to put yourself out there. You don't want to act like an influencer. But how do you become an influencer? You got to talk to an audience. You got to pretend like you're an influencer until you make it, right? This is coming from a girl who started, you know, in a very small town, population 1,100. Everyone and their moms were talking about me when I started on social media because it's like, who does she think she is, right? But then people's perspective changes when it actually starts working for you, right? They're like, oh, well, this is so cool. This is a great job. But they weren't the ones who started supporting you in the beginning. So if any of you guys listen to Mel Robbins, she has the let them theory, right? Okay, so a lot of like my 20-some-year-old girls probably know Mel Robbins. And
Hey, I know who she is.
Yes, and Tony.
Thank you.
But she's like talking about, you know, other people's opinions of you is not your business, all right? So you focus on yourself, you focus on what your story is and sharing that, and that will have so much value in your social media, connecting with people that way, but building your confidence in those face-to-face interactions where you can go and talk to someone, make eye contact, and tell your story, you know? Be comfortable talking about your success, because there's a balance between being confident and being cocky, right? And you can come across as very confident without becoming cocky, and you gotta get comfortable sharing your story.
Okay, Kendall, I'm going to put you on the spot as far
Okay.
as like a project that you're working on. I know you
Yeah.
sent me the pictures.
Yeah.
And if you could talk, we're going to have the panel talk a little bit about some things that they have coming around the bend. So, Kendall, go for it.
All right, so one part of my job is I get to do something really cool that was mentioned actually in the keynote about trade shows. And so they are super exciting, very cool. There are a lot of times where we launch new products. And a trade show is like the intersection of social media, because we're doing live event coverage, we're capturing photos, video content, all sorts of things. We're running print ads. As you can see, we have a beautiful booth with a ton of branding for our new kind of software and platform. And that is something that I'm really excited about because, you know, one thing that I think sometimes we forget in like the stratcom space is there's so much that we can do with our degree. You can do public relations, you can do campaigns, but I've kind of found my spot in what is called product marketing. It is super cool. It's all about how am I going to sell and message this product so that someone else wants to buy it. And it's a very interesting challenge. There's a lot of different ways you can approach it, but that's kind of one of the projects. And then, you know how I said B2B wasn't boring. This past year, I ran a whole campaign all about squashing rumors that were going on about my company. So that's a print ad up there, staying power. It's super simple. It is a little bit bold for the eye care industry. When you think healthcare, it's probably a lot of like white, happy nurses and doctors. This is very different, right? We're using dark colors and different things like that. And it was all based on the fact, we're gonna tell our competition, kind of, screw you. We're here to stay, and like, we're gonna take a stand. So these are just kind of a couple examples of how B2B can be really fun, and also, right, just kind of different approaches and paths that you can take with a comm degree.
Nice. Kate, you're up.
Oh man, I have many irons in the fire, and that's why I love my life. I love doing a bunch of different things. But if you guys want a case study on a creative marketing campaign, so I work with a credit union, WSECU. Now they do the Cougar card, and they're an awesome company to work with. But it is hard to get people excited about a financial institution, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to find creative ways to showcase my use of their products, their services, in my content, which is, I'm a 22-year-old, I am, starting out in life, I'm helping out my farm, I'm trying to figure out how we can diversify. And so one thing is, summer before last, I bought my great-grandparents' original homestead, a house, which I know sounds like a big deal, but it's not livable. It's a very big project, and so I'm having to invest a lot of capital and using like loans and cash flows in a certain way to build back that family history, making that house livable, hopefully eventually turning that into ag tourism. And so I'm working with WSECU on how to tell that story, showcase their products and services in an authentic way, but it's still authentic to my brand and telling my family's story. So if you guys want to follow along with that, go follow WSECU or follow my accounts, and that's going to be an interesting campaign because I don't think that's been done before in the financial space.
Nice. Lance, go for it.
Yeah, so half my time I spend freelancing and hiring people to work with me as a freelancer, then the other half of my time I'm on salary for a network of restaurants and bars, and I've been blessed with being able to have a team since about 2019. So the quote-unquote project, the closest thing I can think to of a project right now, because there's so many things going on, is we're wrapping up a training period and kind of like an overturn with staff, which is really cool because I am already thinking about 2027, at least in the Pullman space, because of tourism and academic calendars and things like that. Which is a really cool thing that I have been able to move through in this social media career, in this creative career, is more directing. I'll have my own agency one day. I'll be able to be in that high level space. And so it's really cool to be able to take the things I've learned and see the things that everybody else that you guys are. I hired many students from WSU and am able to see what you guys are doing in your classes and bring that into these spaces and provide real world experiences while your students are right out of school. Single projects like freelancers, constantly recruiting freelancers to work with that team as well as work with me in different projects all over the country that I get to bounce around and work on, which is really sweet. But the thing that we're wrapping up right now is having a new event coordinator and having new content creators and having managers who can work on these accounts and assist in supporting their digital voice and their online presence through the 2025 season, 2026 season, and 2027 season, and then also equip them to be able to support me in training the next gen and recruiting and things like that. So it's really cool because it kind of feels like a classroom, but it's way more informal. People are getting paid. I'm getting paid. And we're all able to do really cool things that are short-term, long-term, but it also kind of diversifies the opportunities, which is a big thing that over the last few years I've really wanted to do, and I've been blessed to work with people who will equip me to do that, allow me to do that, give me resources to do it. Because I remember how hard it was to find opportunities in college and out of college, even if it was a one-time freelance gig for a few $100, like it was really hard to come by. So being able to facilitate that, support it, make it accessible, for one in Pullman, but over time making that more accessible in other college communities and throughout the Pacific Northwest is really sweet.
Nice. Any other questions? We have time for a few more questions. Yeah, go for it.
I feel like a theme I've heard throughout this entire thing is like know your audience. What are the first steps you guys are taking to like get to know them?
My Instagram story. So I constantly am looking at like DMs and what people's responses to things are, their comments and stuff, and like actually interacting with my community and stuff. And then also seeing what are content creators similar to myself and like what their what type of content they're posting actually does well, and then I kind of do the same kind of thing in my niche. So just kind of monitoring a lot.
Yeah, I think we use a lot of data in terms of like surveys, and we look at industry insights as well. And we kind of do a lot of persona work. So if you guys, that does not go away. You'll still do personas. And it's like, I think that the so-and-so doctor of the mom and pop shop, they're probably around 55 years old and blah, blah, blah. You know, they have a family, they love to volunteer, and they probably have 2 dogs. And so that kind of like can help us create different kinds of giveaways and promotions that are gonna resonate with those people, right? Because if we know a good chunk of the optometrists are women right now, it's a female-dominated industry, which is awesome. You know, we might change the tone, the colors we use in campaigns and graphics and different things like that. So I think it's keeping an eye on trends, like looking at as much data as you can, and I think that's a really awesome application of AI, right? Give AI a data sheet and say, tell me what you can find out about this. But I think, yeah, just kind of looking at it all, any little piece of information that you can get.
For small businesses, hang out in them. I've been privileged enough to be a part of a lot of launches the last like 2 years, and you don't have a ton of data online right away. You've got like industry statistics and stuff that you can work with, which is awesome. But especially in small communities, I've worked with cities that have less than 300 people and cities that have 40,000 people, and these businesses open up and they're trying to figure out what works, and just like grab some food or grab a coffee and sit there for a few hours. People watch, observe, like don't be creepy about it. Like, there are boundaries that you should definitely have in place. But go to these spaces and learn who's there, who's returning, who's enjoying their time there, what they look like, how they behave, what their age is, things like that. And that's stuff that you can leverage really well in establishing an audience and defining it online.
I know we're running up against the clock, so if you had questions, you weren't able to ask it during this, you can connect with them on LinkedIn, but also chat with them after this. But thank you so much. Oh, wait.
Something?
What up?
I am looking for an intern, paid intern. If you guys have any editing background or want to learn about the like ad communication space or social media influencer work, come talk to me. I'm looking for someone. I can introduce you to a wide network of people, help you out with editing, and give you some real industry insights. So come talk to me.
I also have an internship, so lucky ducks, find me, and I'm happy to tell you more about the position and the opportunity.
Lance, what about you?
We're all hiring, apparently.
Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause.